up, everyone? Welcome back to the Collider Interview Studio at Fantastic Fest 2023. I am with the filmmaker behind what is one of my favorite films of the festival so far, JT Mollner for Strange Darling. Congratulations. This one is really something else.
Oh, thank you so much.
So the first thing I need you to do, because I know about your movie, I love your movie, a lot of people here love your movie, our audience has not heard of Strange Darling yet, so can you give everyone a brief synopsis?
One day in the romantic, twisted love life of a serial killer. That's it.
Usually I ask people to give a synopsis so our audience can be informed, but also so I know where to stop for spoilers. This is a very difficult movie to talk about and like to convey how damn good it is without giving away certain details. And I find it so frustrating.
Thank you for that. For me, you know, I go see movies and I always hope that I'm going to be surprised or it's going to take me in a direction. I always want my expectations subverted, and so often they're not. And so as making a movie, I'm trying to just, you know, do something that I enjoy myself. And so the goal was definitely to go in interesting different directions. So I'm glad we surprised you a little bit.
Very much so. And I'll emphasize this interview is totally spoiler free. You are safe here, but try to go into this movie knowing as little as possible because it is exceptional and you do some really unique storytelling work here. And we will get into the nonlinear structure at the very least. But before I get there, I did want to ask you about going from first to second feature. Two-part question on that. What would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions about getting a green light on your second film after making your first? But then also, what is something about the reception to your first that helped you get this movie off the ground and the way you wanted?
It's interesting. My first movie went to Sundance, and it was, I guess now, it's rough. I think it was 7 years ago, which with the pandemic and the shutdown and everything, time got weird for all of us. So it feels more like 4 years to me, but it's been a while. And I remember it took me about 10 years of making short films and doing things to finally get a feature greenlit. And my first feature was never supposed to be a very commercial movie, and we made it for very little money, and we're really grateful that the people at Sundance wanted to play it there. And of course, when it got released and got sold, I thought I would just be doing that every year. I mean, not necessarily every year, but maybe every 2 years, develop and then make a movie. And the movie came out, and it opened all kinds of doors for me. I mean, I was able to stop bartending, and I was able to make a modest living as a director and a writer doing things. But I started, developing my second feature, and we'd have cast and no money and no cast, and the reviews were very mixed on my first movie, and it wasn't a massive hit or anything like that. So it opened all kinds of doors and allowed me to be taken seriously a little bit. But the second movie seemed much harder to make than the first one. It was bizarre, and I wrote. I'm not talking about writing now, but I wrote back then. I wrote a bunch of scripts, and I that I wanted to develop, and it was just really weird because I kept running into brick walls, or we'd develop something and then it would fall apart for one reason or another. This film was really weird because I had this thing ready to go, and we took it around, and then all of a sudden, 4 months later, we were shooting. It was like the quickest. It was weird because it was very, very difficult to get something made. But once I decided to make this, it was the quickest, easiest development. It was something that never happens. It was like a dream come true. I went in and sat down with Bill Block at Miramax, and in the meeting, he said, "Let's make the movie." So it was bizarre. It was like surreal. Now, once we made the movie, it was very, very, it was a very difficult, crazy, like everybody making a movie. It was a very trying experience, but the process of getting it made, once I decided to make this one, was quick. It was one of those weird things.
Revisiting many scenes of this movie, I can understand why the production process would be quite challenging.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the nonlinear story idea. And again, we're not going to spoil anything about it, but I am curious, is it more or less challenging to pitch a nonlinear story to financiers and producers? Because this is an industry where, someone might hear, oh, this starts at chapter 3. Like, that's weird. That's never going to work. I'm not even going to read the rest of it and understand why it's structured that way. So does it make it more or less challenging?
It's interesting because I think this movie, to me, would be boring if it were in order. So personally, it's just me, or just simplistic, right? Like it would be conventional, I think. And so it came to me it was always supposed to be in this order, and the story it plays that way for a reason, and out of that order, it just wouldn't make sense. So it seems like it would be a hard thing to pitch, but in this case, it wasn't, because people understood that. It was weird because after I finished shooting it, was when there were certain people. I mean, it was mixed feeling. I mean, I didn't have a final cut on the movie, but it ended up being my cut. I mean, we reached an agreement, and this is the cut that I wanted, and I'm very happy with it. But there was a time when the director's cut was first submitted where there was kind of a mixed, some people who had influence over the movie wanted it to maybe be in sequence, and some people didn't. And nobody really knows when we're in this vacuum watching, it's 10 of us or something looking at a movie, and I'm really close to it too at that period. So it's like, is this, should it be in sequence? But I always felt that it couldn't be. And so we ended up all coming to a consensus that we were going to keep it out of sequence, thankfully, and now that's the version you saw.
Usually I'm very open-minded about hearing other opinions about things, but no, in this particular case, that was the right and only answer to that. I have to talk about your cast here, because I'm sure you go into it with a great script, but I do think the success of a concept like this hinges on finding the perfect two performers, and you very much do with Willa and Kyle. So when you first met them, can you tell me something about each of them that made you think you are going to crush this role, but also you are going to be a good creative partner for me?
Oh, yeah. One of the great things that happened on this movie for me is that Miramax actually... there was a period where we were kind of talking about a little bit of like value and names and who is going to, but it was very quick. And they actually, at Miramax, they told me at some point, like, we want you to hire people in these leads who are accomplished and who are known and who have done things, but don't worry about the level of star power or this or that. Like, don't worry about it, just cast who's right. And I've never had a financier do that before. And even though I've only made 2 movies, I've worked with many financiers, and movies have been developed. But this was great because I kind of was able to really meet with people who I thought were right for it. And of course the studio had to approve, but they were very supportive. And there's an agent named Christy Hall, and agents get a real bad rap, but Christy Hall's an agent at Paradigm, and she's one of my favorite people in the world. And she, I called her up and said, I have this role and I have some people in mind. Who do you think? And she started pitching Willa and Kyle, both of them right off the bat. And so I wanted to cast the protagonist. I wanted to cast the lady first. And build around her. And we didn't even care about age range. It was sort of like, I just wanted a vulnerability and a charisma and something that you had to look at, and just a really great actor to be in that role. And my wish list had people who were 50 and people who were 20. I mean, it was just a big range, and we figured we'd cast the villain against that, right? So I met with Willa, and she was actually a little younger than I initially thought would be right for it. But we had this amazing meeting, and the same thing happened with Kyle. And one thing I loved about both of them is that, and this is what I was really looking for. I mean, I saw their work. I watched Dinner in America, and I watched all the Reacher episodes. And
Dinner in America is
so good, right? And it was weird. I was a big fan of the Goldfinch. And Willa doesn't have a huge role in that movie, but she's one of the people I remember the most from the movie. And it's so different than this role, but I knew she had that quality, right? So, and I could see her range. She kind of disappeared into different characters. And so for me, when I met her, it was about, how's she going to work? How's she see this character? How's he see this character when I met with him? And both of them, the reason I fell in love with them as actors is because they started talking to me about they had so much compassion for their characters. And I had some other meetings where people didn't have compassion for the characters. And so when I talked to both of these people, all they spoke about was what they related to in these characters, and how they could see their character's point of view. And that's what I wanted. I wanted them to really love who they were playing for all their faults, right? And that's why I think, to me, there's just a lot of humanity in the roles, and it's not because of how the roles were written. It's because of the actors. And so I'm just so proud of both of them, and so grateful that they wanted to do this with me. And I think, when I watch them, I had dinner with Willa a little while ago. And I was looking at her across the table, and I said, she didn't change her appearance that much, but I just said, you're not the lady, like, you're Willa. And when somebody can do that, it's just remarkable. And I love actors, because I was an actor for a little while early on. I always wanted to be behind the camera, but because I've tried it and I've done it, I know how difficult it is. Mm-hmm. So I'm just blown away by both of them. And I think the movie wouldn't work if they hadn't been cast properly.
You could totally tell that this is a movie made by a director who loves and respects the craft of acting. And I really appreciate that. To build on that a little more, can you maybe tell me something about each of their approaches to the work that calls for something different from you as an actor's director, in order to, give them the best working environment and bring the best out of them as actors?
Yeah, for me, I've realized that I think being a director for me is about finding the language, the proper language to communicate with each actor. So every actor that I've worked with has a different language. And sometimes you're feeling that out over the course of the first few days. And the language for Kyle was much different than the language for Willa. And I think an ineffective director probably wouldn't pay attention to that language. It'd be like, this is how I say things, this is how I want you to do things, and you're going to do it. But one thing I'm fascinated by is I'm really interested in, is finding out what makes them tick, what will help them reach their best level. And so Will is an excellent communicator. We'd never worked with each other, and we spent the first 2 days trying to figure it out. And we had a talk after a couple days, and she explained to me what helps her best and what she needs to know about her character in order to perform at her highest level. And so I made sure I facilitated that at all times for her. And then Kyle was like, "This is how I like it, and this is what I do." It's like a dance, and both of them take their job so seriously and care so much that it really helps. You don't have to do much as a director when the actors care so much about their performance that they're protecting it at all times too. Willa many times would, I thought I had what I needed, and I did have what I needed. It would have worked, but she'd be like, can we get one more? 'Cause I'd like to try it this way. And she maybe did that 3 or 4 times over the shoot, and I think every one of the times she did that, I used that take. So she knew best, really. And then of course we had Barbara Hershey and Ed Begley Jr. on set mentoring all of us, and
so
they were
good.
just amazing. But I want to work with these two actors over and over and over again. I hope I get lots of opportunities too.
I do not blame you one bit. I have so many other elements of this production I need to touch on. One thing I wanted to ask you about was the wardrobe for both characters. One, because Kyle's character is basically wearing the same thing the entire time, and it needs to speak to who he is and maybe his past a little. And then with Willa's character, there are so many, I'll go as far to say this, there's so many iconic looks that character rocks in this film. So maybe what was the approach to finding the right thing for Kyle? And of all of Willa's looks, which one went through the biggest evolution as you spoke with your costume designer about it?
It's weird. I think it's a subconscious thing. Like when I'm directing a movie and thinking of things and colors and doing things, like I don't, I'm not usually consciously trying to make a statement or do a certain thing, but then later I'll watch and I'll know where something came from. Right. And so it's interesting. I was thinking as we were watching the movie last night that in my first film, there's a transformation that the lead character makes. And it's sort of this, I was watching the movie last night and I was like, I think I like this weird, like this superhero concept where, people have they can transform. It's chrysalis type thing, and that I had all these different ideas of different versions of Willa's character I wanted to see, and a couple different versions of Kyle's that I wanted to see, and but I also knew how we wanted to make the audience feel through the whole movie, and so more than anything else, I thought color would be the best way to make the audience feel. And so I enlisted Priscilla Elliott, who's one of the greatest production designers, the greatest production designer in the world. And I begged her to do the movie, and I got referenced her by a friend, Richard Kelly, who directed Donnie Darko, and he raved about her, and I brought her on. And then Rudy Rojas was the costume designer, and we worked really closely together because we talked about color control, and how we wanted to stick with a certain color palette for everything for the entire movie, and everything you see on the lady, everything you see on the demon, were things that we had extensive discussions about, for the entire 8 weeks of prep or whatever, and I wanted to. I mean, you never know how many people are going to see your movie. Maybe 10 people will see this movie, but I remember talking to Willa.
I think you've already surpassed 10.
Maybe, maybe, but after it comes out, I don't know. But I think I remember talking to Willa and being like, I just want people to dress up like you for Halloween.
Yes.
I was like,
that's like one of the first things that I thought from the moment the movie opened, and then you keep delivering more options, and I don't know. I want everyone to see it ASAP so I could see some this year, but I'll take some costumes next year too. We got we had a lot of fun with especially her clothing. I thought it was just I don't know, we just everything. We were like, well, those would be cool to put those on. Everything was just a lot of fun, and we knew how the demon. We really wanted Kyle to look a certain way, and just be a fierce presence, and a very intimidating presence. And I think we even, he wears some glasses, and they were kind of what I saw some old pictures. Jeffrey Dahmer was wearing glasses like that. But we wanted them also to have, because we're talking a lot about, good and evil, and how they're really, there's all this gray area in between, and so we wanted also some of their colors to match, because we didn't want such a clear-cut divide. I mean, somebody might be a killer and somebody might not be, but it doesn't mean they're not flawed. It also doesn't mean if they're a killer, they don't have some compassion within them. Anyway. Many more questions. I need to let you go soon, but I wanted to follow up on something, because over the course of this conversation, I get the sense that you're a filmmaker with a great attention to detail. Can you maybe give us an example of something in this movie that I guess might seem small to folks out there watching the film? They would think oh, that's just something you whipped up and it worked out in the movie, but it was something that required one of those really lengthy, deep conversations in order to find the pitch perfect way to bring that to life on screen.
Let's say that, there's a scene where the lady's escaping into the woods, and she ends up coming upon a cottage, and if you noticed, there's a lot of flowers and colors. Flowers everywhere, all outside of the cottage, and reds, blues, yellows, primary colors. And we wanted to, Priscilla and I, the first thing we talked about was blood on the flower bed. That's what we wanted the movie to have a candy coating. My first movie, we desaturated it. It was like McCabe and Mrs. Miller. We wanted it it washed out. This movie was a different approach. We looked at movies like Dead Ringers. We looked at Blue Velvet. And we really wanted it to have that sort of candy coating. And so we wanted that to the dichotomy between the violence and the colors and the richness. We wanted to feel kind of like a fairy tale, right? And so all the flowers, as she's approaching the house, everything was put there by the art department. I mean, they brought in truckloads of flowers. So that's something, every time I see it, I'm really proud of Priscilla and her whole department for doing that. And that's just one of the many things that we did to. And there's also, I don't know if you noticed the framed painting of Ed Begley Jr. and Barbara Hershey.
I saw that.
Yeah. So there's that too. So it just those are fun things for
Did you
me.
keep
Everything.
that? I feel like you had to keep some
I think they have it in a time capsule or something right now, but I'm hoping Miramax lets me have it.
I wouldn't blame you. I'd want to keep that thing. The last thing I'll ask you about is on your shirt. The choice to film this in 35 to get at that from two angles. Why do many filmmakers often veer towards digital? What are some of the challenges one must face when they want to shoot on film? But then also, what was it about shooting on film that you thought would best enhance this story on screen?
Well, for me, it's never been a choice. I started shooting short films when digital was at its peak of kind of, 2009, 2010, 2011. Everybody who was doing short films or low budget films was shooting digitally. A lot of people. We went to Sundance with my first movie. We shot on film, and I think the only other film there that year was Kelly Reichardt's movie. And now I think last year there were like 20 movies. So it's had this great resurgence in large part because of Steve Bellamy and Vanessa Bendetti, who Steve's the president of Kodak, and she runs it with him. And I just believe so much that, moving pictures, light through images, it's so powerful. And it also, not only is the texture and the look of it just unsurpassed by any camera. And I know there's really good digital cameras out there, but there's a feeling you get from film that you can't match. And also there's something on set that happens when you're shooting film. The whole level of approach, the cast, the crew. I mean, I grew up reading books about, Sam Peckinpah's process and Bergman's process, and you're watching the reverence, these sets, the reverence around the process. And so for me, every short film I did, except for one, and it was for a very specific reason, was shot on film, and both my features were shot on film. And maybe I would have made a few more movies. But I've always said I'd rather direct plays than shoot not on film. So I hope I can stick to that. But this movie had to be, as you notice, there's I think you probably noticed there, it takes place in modern times, but it was influenced by movies from a different time. And so we knew in order to find that aesthetic, the only way to go was 35 millimeter. And that's how Giovanni Ribisi and I bonded over film stock, and he's a cinematographer, and we just loved film in the process. And so it was never a choice. And everybody we pitched this movie to, I would just say, listen, I know I haven't made a movie in a few years. I know maybe my stock's not super high right now, but if we're doing this movie, we have to shoot on film. And the last thing I'll say about it is I actually think, I don't think it's much more expensive to shoot on film, as long as you're not making a movie for 50 grand or 100 grand. But if it's a low budget movie that still has somewhat of a budget, I believe that I have to shoot very efficiently. So my shooting ratio is I think much more efficient than if I was just shooting and shooting and shooting. There's a lot of planning that has to go in ahead of time. And I think even though there's one light item or two line items, there's a scanning in the film that adds some money to the budget, I think we save in so many other line items in post. Because what we shoot is, when we went into color, all we were doing was leveling things out and dialing them in, but we weren't creating a look at all in color, in post. So we really saved a lot of money because we were shooting film.
Again, I like to stay open-minded with all the options out there, but the correct choice for this movie, everything comes together so well. So many more questions.
I love a lot of movies that are shot digitally, by the way. I have the Nicholas Winding Refn as well. I think film, I think any movie I think any movie would be just a tiny bit better if it were shot on film. That's just my opinion. I love it.
When your movie comes out and everyone can see it, we can go back to all these questions that have like question marks next to them because I wasn't sure if it was crossing the line into spoiler territory or not.
Thank you for that.
I must let you go though, so you can continue celebrating your movie at Fantastic Fest. Congratulations on Strange Darling.
Thank you so much for the compliments about the movie. I'm so glad you liked it.
I mean it.
Cool.